So in episode 6 of Doom Patrol, we dial it back a bit compared to the last few weeks' episodes being filled with action. This episode focuses more on the characters. We go to space, we meet some new characters, and I've been telling you all for a while, we cannot trust Niles. We're going to talk about that and much more. Episode 6 of Season 2 of Doom Patrol was titled Space Patrol. Larry is tasked with handling Niles' old research team when the ageless astronauts return from space. As Niles and Cliff set out to find a missing Dorothy, a funeral in the underground occupies Jane's mind. Meanwhile, Vic discovers a curious connection between Roni and S.T.A.R labs, and Rita finds that her role in the upcoming community theater production hits too close to home. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, spoiler discussion of the latest episode of Season 2 of Doom Patrol, Episode 6, titled Space Patrol. Very interesting episode. Very excited to be here to break it all down with you all. But before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my new content. Give this video a thumbs up, helps out the channel, but I also really appreciate it. And last but not least, if and when you've seen this latest episode of Doom Patrol, let me know your thoughts about that ending, about the potential, the foreshadowing within this episode for characters like Rita and Larry and our buddy Cliff. Let's talk about all of our pros and cons in the comments below. Let's have some fun discussions down there. So this episode was really character focused. Again, like I said in my opening there, the last couple weeks with the sex demons and everything that we got last week with, you know, some action moments. This episode definitely kind of dialed it back, which is these are the episodes that really make me appreciate these characters, learn about these characters, and see how broken they are, right? It's not always about the spectacle. It's not always about the action and, you know, all the different things that we give the show. It's about learning these characters and also feeling, even though they're superheroes or not necessarily superheroes, but they're people with abilities, metahumans, we can still relate to the things that they go through in this show. And that's what I love about Doom Patrol and I love about this show in particular is just the character moments. So this is definitely a character-focused episode. We're going to break it down, recap it, and all that fun stuff. So again, spoilers, if you haven't seen the episode, check it out, come back and join the conversation. So let's start off with this recap. So it opens up immediately after last week's events where we saw Dorothy make a wish to the candle maker, and in return, we see the candle maker, you know, takes out Baby Doll, takes out the fiery persona character, and leaves a trace. One of the visual cool things about the candle maker, very scary, menacing character, but the effects, like the wax effects that he leaves after his victims, I thought that was a really cool touch to the to that character and kind of the mark of death, if you want to call it that. So really interesting opening that we pick up immediately after the events last week. We see Cliff brings Niles the newfound finger that he found when he went with a Cyborg to Michigan and puts it in the freezer, and we'll see what comes of that finger and who finds it, especially after what happens to Cliff after in this episode. But we get confirmation, as I had mentioned last week. Could it have been the Department of Bureaucracy, the Bureau of Normalcy? I'm sorry, that was you know, called in by, I believe Paul is his Larry's son's name, and we did get confirmation that's who that group of people were. So the Bureau of Normalcy is still out there. They seem to be more smaller of a group. They seem to not have learned their lessons from the negative spirit and how to capture him. So we'll see if they play any more into this season, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that we learned this week about this season being cut down to 9 episodes in this video. But we get all that stuff there, and Roni and Cyborg have their kind of side subplot, which this, to me, this relationship with Roni and Cyborg really points towards what I said in my review earlier this season or last season, where I think this show is really starting to gravitate towards Cyborg either getting into the Titans universe or having his own type of spinoff. But this episode really kind of lays down those foundations that I think that's where the show is veering toward, is having Cyborg kind of slowly and gradually go away from Doom Patrol. We'll see about that, but let me know what you all think about this relationship so far. We see Roni has debts, you know, and they agree to kind of talk about each other's past, and, you know, Cyborg agrees to help her and look at her tech spine and all that stuff. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but very interesting to see the show kind of, again, I think that they're pointing towards Cyborg slowly but surely inching his way out of the Doom Patrol. Cliff finds Jane is covered in wax, and we see and shows Niles, and of course Niles' first question is, where's Dorothy? Which, you know, the response from Cliff is, I don't give a F about Dorothy, I care more about Jane. Obviously with the relationship they developed over the last few seasons, or the last 2 seasons, and you know, obviously the relationship for the last, you know, 50 plus years or so. But there, of course, after the midst of all this chaos, is a spaceship that lands in their front yard. And, of course they know Niles. We know that, right? Niles knows all the weird stuff Niles is associated with. We find out that Niles, back in 1955, sent a research team into space, some astronauts, of course, to help with his research of developing, all his stuff of being immortal. We see that we meet the pioneers of the Uncharted, characters by the name of Zip, Specs, and Moskov. So some really interesting characters, to say the least. We always know this show has some very colorful, very diverse, very interesting characters in the pioneers of space. I'm not sure if this is a comic book callback. Again, I'm not too familiar with Doom Patrol comics, so I don't know if this is an homage to some characters that have made an appearance in the comic book run. Let me know, for those that are familiar with Doom Patrol comics, if this is characters that we that have been presented in the comic book format. So let me know that. We look back and we head back to the underground, where we see that the other personas they've made a vote to have Baby Doll and the fiery persona creature be put into the well. And we all know when you go to the well, as we found out last year, you don't really come back. But we'll talk about that at the end. But when Miranda was the one that went into the well, and we'll definitely talk about Miranda here in a bit. But they've made a vote, and that seems like that's the direction they're going to go, is to put them in the well. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. They do find a note from Dorothy saying that she's sorry, she didn't mean to do it, which is just like, Dorothy, I'm a fan of the Dorothy character, and even though she's a kid per se, but she's 100 plus years old, there's still some responsibility to be made in saying that, she didn't mean to do it. It's like, well, you're the one that made the wish, Dorothy. But let me know what you all think about that note from Dorothy saying that she didn't mean to do it, which I think that she did mean to do it, because she was, offended by what Baby Doll said about her father now. So there's some consequences that Dorothy should definitely take responsibility from. But, she goes to space, which, we got to throw away logic in this show sometimes. It's like, okay, Dorothy, again, she's 100 plus years old, but she's really has a child of 11-year-old. She goes to space. She knows how to operate the spaceship from the 1955s. I don't know if it had like a, kind of autopilot mode and just took her to space. We'll throw that logic aside for now, right? But we see Niles and Cliff go after her, and Niles, of course, has his own spaceship, and of course is mixed with science and magic with the goat head and all that fun, crazy stuff that I love about this show. So Niles convinces Cliff to help him, because he's like, hey, I'm going to be gone pretty soon. And if you want those updates, you better help me get my daughter. So that's how he convinces him to go to space. We finally get some interesting storylines for Larry and Rita. And particularly with Larry, we see that he has a brief chat with Moskov. They shake hands, and boom, he finds out that she has a negative spirit like he does. And Rita is in the play, her subplot with, get into this play again. The weaker plots with Cyborg, Rita, and Larry compared to Cliff and Niles and Dorothy and Crazy Jane, but some interesting stuff, to say the least, compared to some of the more dry stuff that I'm not the biggest fan of with Rita and Larry. But Rita has her stuff with the play. They're reenacting what happened in season 1, episode 1, with her, the town being sucked in by Rita. So I love kind of that they're giving them some storylines that I find interesting so far compared to the previous stuff. But again, we see all this stuff going down. Larry gets some information about how she's able to master the negative spirit, that it took her 5 years to do so. And obviously Larry's like, man, it's taking you 5 years, and it's taken me, 60 plus years to kind of contain, or at least get to the point where I'm at with the negative spirit. So I thought that was interesting. And we see, the biggest thing is that she kind of relayed to Larry is you have to accept your gifts, versus we obviously know he hasn't to the fullest to his abilities thus far in these 2 seasons. So going back to Cyborg, we see him telling Roni about the events, and it just sounds so funny coming out of Cyborg, all this stuff that we know that happened in season 1, from the donkey to the cults to the recreator, decreator, all the stuff that we went through in season 1. But within this moment, we see Roni has tech on her spine. Again, they're slowly peeling the pieces about Roni's character. I still kind of have some feeling that she might not be as good and as sweet and honest as Cyborg in the show is making her out to be. And again, maybe she's connected to the Bureau of Normancy. Maybe she's connected to someone else. We find out that she does have connections to S.T.A.R Labs. Cyborg, again, I think this is pointing towards Cyborg slowly but surely making his way out of Doom Patrol. But we see that she's connected to S.T.A.R Labs, and they look into all that, and we get a conversation with Cyborg and his dad, and they have the conversation about, son, I need you to slow down. I know you like this young girl, but you guys are moving at a faster pace, and he doesn't know the connections to Ronnie's tech, and I think that's going to be obviously a storyline that, again, could foreshadow a potential spinoff to Cyborg, can potentially spin off to him on the Titans. Keep an eye out for that particular buyer who put all that tech into Ronnie. So as we move forward, we see Dorothy in space talking to the candle maker about her decision, and the candle maker trying to make her embrace him more. As they kind of conversate, she says, you're talking more. Where did you learn these words? And he basically tells her, hey, the older you get, the smarter I get, vice versa, things of that nature. So we meet a new persona. I don't think that they gave her a name. Going to the underground right now, we see that there's some lady, as they're going to the funeral. Let me know in the comments if they gave her that persona a name. But we see them at the funeral, and Jane visits Kay and tries to convince the others to not throw them in the well, and we'll get to that here in a bit. But very interesting, somber moment. Again, this episode was very slower paced, but character driven, more emotional than we're usually seeing compared to the last 2 weeks of the show. So going back to Moscow, having a serious conversation with Larry about how to connect with the spirit. And man, I wish you would have came in a little bit sooner, like maybe last year, so we can get more of this interesting stuff. This is the most interested I've been in Larry, if I'm being honest with you all. I appreciate the storylines from season 1. Him figuring out his identity, him, kind of putting the pieces to what he did to his family in his, kind of being content with that. But I wish that we would have gotten this conversation maybe late last season before we can really get more into this Larry character. But I'm loving all the stuff that we got from Larry in this episode. As we kind of wrap up the episode here, Niles starts to see his faults in raising or lack of raising Dorothy. And in the result of that, she created her imaginary characters. And of course, we know that the imaginary characters, the abilities they have, they possess the power to end the universe, as we know, or the world at least. Niles convinces Cliff to talk to Dorothy, which I'm thinking to myself, well, Cliff doesn't have the best, history with talking to his kids and his daughter. But, in the grand scheme of things, it was really well written. And we'll get to that because I think it was a rich moment in the character because his father's skills aren't all the way there. But why I find this to be a great character moment is because, again, you see Cliff interact with Jane, and he sees Jane as a daughter. We see Cliff interacting with Dorothy in this episode, and he sees her sort of as a daughter. So I love that they did put Cliff in that position because, again, it builds character, and it makes sense, right? So I love that moment, and just great writing, and also love that scene, and we'll talk about that scene here in a bit. But Rita gets some insight from the girl who's playing her in a play, and again, I like this moment because it kind of reflects on Rita's inner turmoil and the stuff that she goes through mentally and the stuff that how she sees herself and how she perceives herself. So again, slower episode, nonetheless, but a good episode in regards to character, quieter moments. These are the episodes, these are the moments that builds the characters that we love. So smaller stuff with Rita, but still important stuff in my opinion. We see that Spec and Zap have died long ago, and they're just kind of, shells of themselves at this point. We see Cliff and Dorothy having, again, a great character, quieter moment about, Dorothy telling Cliff that she's building a grave and, in response to Manny dying. But Manny was so important to her because it was the last thing that she can really relate to with her mom, which was a really good moment because Cliff said that his daughter didn't really know her mom. And just, again, quieter moment, but good character moment and great writing in that scene and just a really emotional moment. Larry says his goodbye to Moskoff and she invites him to space, foreshadowing for maybe Larry eventually going off to space. Cliffhanger, 9 episodes, he might go off to space, and it might show the Doom Patrol splitting apart, something to keep an eye out for as far as Cliff or Larry going to space. He wants to make amends with his family. We'll see how that goes next week. But as we wrap up the episode, final moments, we see Jane convinces for a moment to have the personas not throw Baby Doll and the fiery creature into the well, but as she's speaking, Miranda comes up in the well and rises, and she convinces the group to indeed throw the bodies of Baby Doll and the fiery figure into the well and to kind of move on from those characters because they're no longer needed. And as we wrap up the episode, we see Miranda is now the primary, which will be very interesting to see this new persona. Is she good? Can we trust her? What abilities does Miranda have? It seems like she has the abilities to convince people to do things, and she seems to be a very interesting character. So very interested to see where this character goes in the coming weeks. Last scene of the episode, we see Cliff coming to liking Dorothy, to accepting her more, and tells Niles he's willing to help her become more a part of the family. And as soon as he says that, as I've been saying, Niles is someone that we still cannot trust, ladies and gentlemen. After finding out what we did last season, he's all about himself. He's all about keeping himself safe. And Dorothy, he ejects Cliff into space. We know Cliff can't die because he can't breathe. But it'll be really interesting to see, number one, where he lands, who finds Cliff, and how pissed will Cliff be when he sees Niles again. I don't know if Green Lanterns can help him out maybe in space. Very interesting to see how these episodes play out. I purposely don't watch next week's previews just because I love going into these shows and this episodes week to week, kind of brand new, fresh, without having anything maybe spoiled in the trailers. So very excited to see what comes of episode 7. As I had mentioned up top, we found out other day, I had mentioned in my season 1 review that I felt like 15 episodes were just too much. I felt like there were a lot of filler episodes. Things were stretched out too long. So I was okay with it being 9 episodes this season. But the reason it was 9 episodes is because the coronavirus stopped production of I don't know how many episodes they intended to have in season 2, but we're only getting 9. So that probably means we're going to end this season on the cliffhanger. Larry going to space, Cliff finding maybe the Green Lanterns, maybe, and Dorothy. We'll see. I definitely imagine we get a cliffhanger in this season 2 finale of episode 9. But unfortunate that they had to stop production. And I assume that they chose to do episode 9 because they felt it was a great way to end the season. And we'll see if the rest of the episodes they shot or intended to shoot will be part of season 3, or if they just scrap those ideas. But let me know what you all think about finding out that it was cut short due to the coronavirus and the production being halted for that. So again, like, share, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts about this latest episode, the repercussions of Dorothy, and Cliff being in space. Miranda's the new primary. Larry's going to amend things with his family. Will he connect to the negative spirit a little bit sooner than 5 years? Will he go into space? Will Rita continue to go with this play? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, check out my other content. I did a review for Fatal Affair on Netflix. I have a watch along for the 10-year anniversary of Inception this Saturday, 6 p.m. with some special guests. And then, of course, on Sunday, my weekly recap of Perry Mason. Hope you all are staying safe. Thank you for watching this review, and we'll see you on the next video.